Love your enemies. Okay, to start this session, we'll go back just a little bit to some some quotes, some additional understanding of what love means. Love does not refer to sentimentality or ardent affection, but rather to being warm towards, kindly, amicable, that is, to be well disposed toward. And particularly for today, loving your enemies, uh, it is significant to adopt this second version here of to be well disposed towards, or um, to be kind, to be friendly, because we get we get sentimental love mixed up with that love that is within us all. Um, so just keep that in mind as we go through. And just another something to think about: love. It's the absence of hate, resentment, fear, and all negativity in your heart. Because if you if you have hate or any of these things, resentment, um, the love cannot flow from you. It is kind of, I guess what you would say, stuck because of the hate and the resentment. So we'll start with just a basic definition of enemy. An enemy is a person, group, or thing that is hostile to, opposes, or seeks to harm another. And just a a few examples here. Of course, we all know, when it comes to military, our enemy, an opposing armed force in a war. And of course, political, a rival or opponent in politics. Um, and on the personal front, someone who hates or opposes another person and tries to cause them harm. And under abstract, a concept or thing that is detrimental to someone else, such as ignorance, is the enemy of progress. And in a figurative sense, and this is really important, a person whose own habits or flaws are a source of harm to them, as in alcohol was his greatest enemy. And I would say in our world today, those with mental health illness, that is an enemy to that person, a very sad, serious enemy to that person. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go, as we read the scriptures and talk about what it really meant and what it means. And so we're going to be focusing on Matthew 5:44 through 48.
You have heard that it is said, be kind to your friend and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless anyone who curses you, do good to anyone who hates you, and pray for those who carry you away by force and persecute you, so that you may become sons of your Father who is in heaven, who causes his sun to shine upon the good and the bad, and who pours down his rain upon the just and the unjust. For if you love only those who love you, what reward will you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same thing? And if you salute only your brothers, what is it more that you do? Do not even the tax collectors do the same thing? Therefore, become perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect.
Okay, now these few verses say a lot. And so we're going to break them down and talk about them. And of course, Matthew 5:44, but I say to you, love your enemies. Um, that is something that is the heart of Jesus' teachings. Um, and although there are some references that we're referring to in as you will see in the Old Testament, uh, but Jesus is the only one that came right out directly and said, "Love your enemies." Okay, now, and of course, remember, Jesus taught from the Torah. So there's always some kind of background to what Jesus is teaching in the Old Testament. So we're going to go to uh, Proverbs 25:21.
If your enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For when shall you do these things for him? You will heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord will reward you.
All right, and then we're just going to jump ahead here. We find this in uh, uh, Paul in the Romans 12:20.
Therefore, if your enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so, you shall heap coals of fire on his head.
Okay, now let's see what we're talking about here. All right, when when you read this, ordinarily, when people read this, um, and they read heap coals of fire on his head, um, it it of course gives it gives the wrong picture. But the reason is because this is a an idiom, okay, and it means something totally different, okay. So the phrase "heap coals of fire on his head" suggests that generosity and sharing will awaken an enemy and eliminate his wrong thinking. So basically, um, if you uh, heap coals of fire, if you are kind to or whatever the situation is to your enemy, um, they are going to be incredibly surprised. And in some cases, they say, they might be embarrassed too. But by heaping the coals of fire on his head, by being kind, by being good to this person, um, you just might not have an enemy anymore. Um, because as it says here, um, by your being kind to whomever, your enemy, it will awaken something in them. Okay. And so it may flush out that negativity or whatever that makes him an enemy, and it do the same thing to you. I mean, that's another part of this, and we're going to go into it more next week. So, but when an individual um, eats another's bread and then does him harm, people say concerning that person, his bread will blind his eyes. Evil cannot be overcome with evil. Only good overcomes evil. So the coals of fire are good when you when you keep it on your enemy, and good makes a person's light shine on one's enemies. And the idea here, it will make them see the truth and change their hearts. In addition, this should also say it will make them and you see the truth and change your heart. Change that person from an enemy to a friend. Now, one of the other that's really significant, and we talked about this a lot, has to do with the custom or tradition in the ancient Near East of hospitality. And one of the most peculiar customs in biblical lands is that of feeding and sheltering one's enemies. Semites are noted for their hospitality to friends and strangers who visit their homes, but they are equally mindful of their enemies. At times, they are more generous toward the latter than the former, meaning they are more generous toward their enemy than to their friends and strangers. Near Easterners believe that sharing their bread with their enemies will protect them and eventually change the attitude of their enemies toward them. People often say his bread protected him, meaning that an enemy did not kill him on account of the bread that he had broken with him. To eat bread with another is a pledge of peace. One who refuses to break bread when invited to do so is considered a dangerous enemy. So this hospitality tradition, one of the things it's not in here, but one of the rules was that you would take in whether an enemy or anyone, but basically you would take in an enemy, and it was like it wasn't in the law, but it was a tradition, but the rule was you could house an enemy for 3 days. After the third day, there would be no protection for the enemy. So they would house the enemy, and they would help to they would help the enemy with whatever his predicament was. And one of those traditionally, this stands today. Now, maybe not in some places that have been westernized, so to speak, but it clearly stands in Afghanistan. And there was a movie, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it still stands today. And in that movie, one of our soldiers who were in Afghanistan was being chased by the enemy, and an Afghani family took him in, and then they helped him. They went out and found whatever, I don't know, it was his platoon, or they found out how he could get away from the enemy and get home. And
I
so,
believe that was the Lone Survivor, Penny. Not to cut you off. Lone Survivor, that was the movie.
okay, yeah. So The Lone Survivor was the movie. Um, might want to watch it. It's a little difficult in terms of violence. Um, but you see towards the end, you see the whole picture of the Afghanistan family taking in the soldier. Okay. And now we get to where he said, bless anyone who curses you. And so um, cursing was a major thing back in the ancient days. And it it's also, it was a belief system. They believed in these curses, and we have to remember that they believed that God was responsible for both good and bad. And um, so given that belief system, um, they did curses and revenge. And if you really want to know what cursing is all about, you go to Psalm 109, verses 1 through 11, I think.
Hold not thy peace, O God of my praise. For the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are opened against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue and with a hateful voice, and have fought against me without a cause. For my love they reproach me, but I have prayed for them, and they have rewarded me evil for good, and hatred for my love. Command thou vengeance against them, and let Satan stand at their right hand. When they shall be judged, let them be condemned, and let their prayer become sin. Let their days be few, and let others take what they have stored. Let their children be fatherless, and their wives widows. Let their children be continually vagabonds and beg. Let them seek their bread also out of their desolate places. Let the creditor take all that they have, and let the strangers make them to be weakened.
This is pretty rough stuff here.
Yes.
Um, it but I put this in here because that is the way it was then. Now, and I really can't. I will just say, with tongue in cheek, whatever, it is the way it is today. If you take a look at what Israel is doing and against the Palestinians. Um, somehow, in some way, I think they're still holding on to things like this, revenge, and of course, remember, they don't believe in Jesus, and so anyway, but like I say, if you want to know what cursing is all about, go to that psalm, and and there's more of this. I mean, it's rough. So and it's just another point about the Bible. You can't, okay, many of our Christian religions believe that God wrote the Bible. And so whatever is in the Bible, that was God and that's acceptable and whatnot. But you can't take the Bible that way. You have to understand the background. And then you have to go to Jesus and understand that he was addressing these things and trying to tell them, no, 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 no. Revenge, cursing, that's not where it's at. Love is where it's at. And just an interesting thing, and of course, he said, and pray for those who carry you away by force and persecute you. And of course, back then, the Jews and the Israelites, well, mainly they had been taken captives many times, but mainly the Babylonians, when they captured uh, Israel and the Jews, they actually picked up the people and moved them to Babylonia. And of course, it happened other times too. That's what Jesus was referring to. But I found it interesting. The King James Version used says, "Pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." And I just kind of thought this is one place where I think it's more meaningful to us today because using people um, is almost a tradition in our society and whatnot. So, but we still have to pray for them. Okay, now I wanted to address hate uh here uh with with some of these scriptures. And the first verse in the scriptures that we read, says that you I think it's you've heard it said to hate your enemies. And um so a couple of points here. One, when he said that ye have heard it said, that does not mean that is not a law, okay? But it is something culturally and society that hate, uh, hate has been in the Old Testament from the beginning. All right, and so I have a few scriptures here just so we can understand where they were at and what Jesus was trying to, what Jesus had to contend with when he was trying to tell the people that love is far far better than hate. And so we go to Exodus 23:22.
But if you shall indeed obey his voice and do all that he says to you, then I will hate those who hate you and oppress your enemies.
Okay, now they're saying this is what God would do. This was their viewpoint, but we know that it is a God of love, and of course that did not come about until Jesus' time, that understanding. And okay, and go ahead, Leviticus 19:17.
You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall in any wise rebuke your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him.
And so that's a little better, okay? You shouldn't hate your brother in your heart. Um, but but the rest of it is lest you incur sin because of him. Well, that's just the way they saw it. Okay, now uh Deuteronomy 16:22.
Neither shall you set up for yourselves any statue which the Lord your God hates.
Now, God does not hate anybody, but God is love. But I wanted to put these in here just to point out, and that is perhaps um, where the hate uh, comes from. Although hate in our world, hate is learned. Hate is not like love. Love is at the very core of our being. Everyone, no matter what they've done, no matter what their behavior, love is at the core of our beings. But given what appears here, and given the fact that this is in the Bible, okay, and hate, I'm not saying that it's the cause why people hate them, but what I'm saying is the background, it is in the Bible. And so that could very, very much have effect, especially with things going on in the Middle East and whatnot. Okay, Deuteronomy 7:9-10.
That you may know, therefore, that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and mercy with those that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repays those that hate him during their lifetime. He requites them that he may destroy them. He shall not be slack to those that hate him, but he repays them during their lifetime.
Okay, now this is very interesting because it says that God keeps covenant and mercy with those that love him and keep his commandments. All right. But we know that God is a parent to us all. We are all brothers and sisters. And God God is not just with those who are perfect, so to speak. Those that keep his commandments and love him. God's with everybody. Okay, because we're all one big family, brothers and sisters, and God is the Father. So again, this reflects back on the attitude, back up with Moses and whatnot, and the Torah. This is in the Torah. So, and when it says he repays those, and that he will destroy them that don't love him. He shall not be slack to those who hate him. Well, again, this is what Jesus was trying to change, and I don't really like saying these kind of things, but traditional Christianity falls back on these things because we have the heaven and the hell. We have going to hell, and that says that God will do these things. And the interpretation of Revelation is, I guess that's Jesus coming back and destroying and whatnot. And that's just not the case when we understand that God is love God doesn't punish and God doesn't reward. And we've talked about love. Love pours forth through us from God. And it's love. No, there's no bad things, and God is not going to punish anybody, but God's going to be there. No matter what kind of trouble you get in, you just need to turn to Him. And the problem with that in our Christian world and whatever is because of the thing about sin and being clean from sin and whatnot, and guilt. Many people will not turn to God because of guilt. And so, anyway, this just popped up on me to say all this, but that's what's that's what's been happening. This was here 6,000 years ago, okay, and then and Jesus came along and showed us and actually demonstrated, but somehow that's kind of gotten ignored. And then we go to the New Testament. The New Testament and in Christianity sees some of this, but it's still based upon, it's sin-based, and people will have guilt because they've sinned and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, enough of that. So hate, and we're going to talk more about hate versus love next week when we finish this up. So anyone then actualizing this kind of attitude, the attitude of good and being friendly towards, or just being well disposed towards an enemy, in reality has no enemy. And that's kind of what we're working towards. Because if you have enemies, you got problems within you too. So depending on how you handle it. Hatred and vengeance only breed more hatred and vengeance. But love nourishes and encourages the finest in human beings. All right. A little story about loving your enemy. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it. And this is about Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln tried love and left for all history a magnificent drama of reconciliation. When he was campaigning for the presidency, one of his arch enemies was a man named Stanton. For some reason, Stanton hated Lincoln. He used every ounce of his energy to degrade him in the eyes of the public. So deep-rooted was Stanton's hate for Lincoln that he uttered unkind words about his physical appearance and sought to embarrass him at every point with the bitterest diatribes. But in spite of this, Lincoln was elected president of the United States. Then came the period when he had to select his cabinet, which would consist of the persons who would be his most intimate associates in implementing his programs. He started choosing men here and there for the various secretaryships. The day finally came for Lincoln to select the man to fill the all-important post of Secretary of War. Can you imagine whom Lincoln chose to fill this post? None other than the man named Stanton. There was an immediate uproar in the inner circle when the news began to spread. Advisor after advisor was heard saying, "Mr. President, you are making a mistake. Do you know this man Stanton? Are you familiar with all of the ugly things he said about you? He is your enemy." Mr. Lincoln's answer was terse and to the point. Yes, I know, Mr. Stanton. I am aware of all the terrible things he has said about me. But after looking over the nation, I find he is the best man for the job. And Stanton became Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War and a friend, and rendered an invaluable service to his nation and his president. So that's my favorite story. Next week, if you got some favorite stories, you could share them, and I have some more. So we'll close with these statements about love, just to get the idea. When you love your enemies and pray for those who hate you, you release the potent force that is hidden within every human being. The power of love is stronger than any armor of the flesh. It conquers that which weapons of war have failed to conquer and heals the wounds that refuse healing. Love is a bonding force, not only between you and your loved ones, but between you and all individuals. Love knows no boundaries and racial distinctions, and love is exactly like the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the rays of the sun that shine on all of God's creation. It is limitless, and its source is eternal. So to finish this off next week, we'll have some more stories. We're going to talk about, when it says up here, when you love your enemies and pray, you release the potent force. We're going to talk about what it does for us if we love, period, or love our enemies. Okay. And I'm very appreciative of your contributions. And I just, this is just whatever this is discussion. You can say whatever resonates with you or what didn't. And anyway, so I just said, can we and how do we love our enemies?